Today, we're going to explore a really fundamental concept, willpower. But we're going to look at it through a new lens, reframing it not as some constant battle, but as a practice of alignment, and really a key part of presence-driven leadership.
So let me ask you this. Does this scenario sound familiar? You start the day with these crystal clear intentions. You're going to eat healthy, you're going to finish that big project, you're definitely going to stay off social media. But then, by mid-afternoon, you find yourself on autopilot right back in those old patterns, and you're left with that sinking feeling of failure. If that resonates with you at all, trust me, you are not alone.
And here's the key insight I want to share today. That feeling of exhaustion, that isn't some moral or personal failing on your part. It's actually a sign that the strategy we're all using is based on a total misunderstanding of what willpower even is and how it really functions. So let's explore that a little deeper. All right, here's our roadmap. We're going to start by looking at something called the willpower paradox. Then we'll move beyond that brute force method that just doesn't work. From there, we'll get practical and talk about how to architect your environment and actually train your willpower. And all of this is leading to our ultimate goal, building that internal authority that only comes from lasting self-trust. Okay, first up, the willpower paradox. This gets right to the heart of that frustrating cycle where it feels like the harder we try, well, the more we seem to fail. You know, we've all been taught that self-control is the answer, right? That we should just be able to resist temptation by using sheer force of will. But our brains don't really work that way. They operate on these deeply learned patterns, and constantly fighting those ingrained pathways is just, well, it's an exhausting battle. It's kind of like trying to swim upstream against a really powerful current. Eventually, you're going to get tired. So if brute force isn't the answer, then what is? This brings us to a really crucial shift in perspective. It's about moving from a constant battle to a practice of alignment. And this leads us to a core metaphor from the psychologist Dr. Roy Baumeister. He frames self-control not as some moral virtue, but as a muscle. And just like any other muscle in your body, if you overwork it, if you fatigue it, it runs out of energy. This slide just lays it out so clearly. You've got the old view. This idea of brute force, that willpower is some endless moral virtue, and if you fail, it's a character flaw. Then there's the new view, which is so much more useful. It sees willpower as a finite muscle, an energy source that can be depleted. And in this view, failure isn't a character flaw at all. It's just a sign of fatigue. And you know what? That simple shift changes everything. Okay, so if willpower is a finite muscle, then the smartest strategy isn't to just use it more, it's to preserve it. And this leads us right to our next point, becoming the architects of our own environment. This is all about shifting from reactivity to responsibility. Think about it. Every single day, we are surrounded by these invisible cues and triggers. That cookie jar on the counter, the phone buzzing on the desk, the TV remote sitting right there on the armrest. These aren't just neutral objects. To our brain, they are signals that pull us toward our established autopilot habits, and they drain our willpower muscle without us even noticing it's happening. There's a fascinating study that highlights this perfectly. They took a bunch of college students who watched way too much TV and moved them into new dorms. Now here's the interesting part. The students whose new rooms had the exact same furniture layout, they fell right back into their old TV habits. But the ones who had a different layout, they successfully changed their behavior. This just proves a key principle. Changing your cues is way more powerful than just relying on willpower. So the takeaway here is pretty clear, isn't it? The most effective path isn't to try and build bigger walls of resistance against temptation. It's to design an environment where you are exposed to less temptation in the first place. You are the architect of that space. All right, so now that we've talked about protecting our willpower by shaping our environment, we can start to actively strengthen it. And this is all about creating a deliberate space for becoming the person you truly intend to be. So let's forget that idea of willpower being some heroic, in-the-moment struggle against a warm brownie. True willpower is actually something much more strategic than that. It's what happens when a deep commitment is supported by really thoughtful preparation. This whole process really breaks down into two key steps. First is commitment, making a really clear decision that's rooted in your why. And second is preparation, actively designing your life to support that commitment. This means removing triggers, maybe changing your schedule, and planning ahead for those difficult scenarios. You're not leaving your success to chance.
And just like any muscle, you train it with small, consistent reps. This doesn't have to be some massive life overhaul. It can be as simple as pausing for just a second before you check your phone, or choosing to sit up straight, or just not immediately reacting to a comment that triggers you. Every single one of those is a small workout that builds real strength over time. And finally, this brings us to the real goal of all this work. It's not just about changing a few habits. It's about building a deep and lasting sense of self-trust, which is the very foundation of what we call internal authority. So what is internal authority? It's the capacity to trust that you will do what you say you will do. It's about building an internal foundation of integrity where your actions are in alignment with your deepest commitments. And that allows you to lead from a place of presence. See, your brain doesn't build trust on promises. It builds trust on evidence. Every single time you follow through on a small commitment, something as simple as getting up without hitting the snooze button, you're providing your brain with proof. You're showing it, see, we can do this. And that evidence makes it progressively easier to tackle bigger and bigger changes. And here's a simple, repeatable plan to build that evidence. First, you choose something so simple you are 100% sure you can do it. No doubt. Second, you just stay consistent until it feels automatic, until it becomes what we call a daily natural action. And then, only then, as you feel that confidence and self-trust growing, do you gradually increase the challenge. So as we wrap this up, let's make it really practical. Instead of thinking about some massive overhaul, I want you to focus on just one thing. What is one small trigger that you can remove, or maybe just redesign in your environment this week? How can you preserve your willpower and create a true space for becoming?